wonderful to see everyone still around, given we are the last panel of the day, but we have saved the last. Oh no, there's apparently another panel after us. Oh, we're second last panel of the day, but we have quite an impressive panel here of practitioners. And today a lot of us have heard a lot about digital transformation. We've heard a lot about some of the challenges, some of the theories. Today we're going to unpack those challenges and opportunities. We're going to look at some of the ways that we are adopting some of the digital transformation, but really through an Indo-Pacific lens. And the best people to do that are practitioners on the ground who are living in those nations and working very specifically on developing and implementing some of those digital transformation elements. So I've got a couple of questions I'll start off with. I'm very cognizant to bring the audience in early on the questions because I know a lot of you will want to ask direct questions of some of the practitioners here. But the first question I'm going to pose is to Stephen, particularly because PNG has most recently held their national, and it became international this year, transformation conference with much success. So I really want to pose the first question to you, Stephen. What are some of the challenges? We talk a lot about digital transformation and AI and data centres and e-safety and health, but how you as a nation, what are the challenges that you see in terms of implementing your digital transformation agenda? And what were some of the conversations which came out at your conference last week?
Thank you, Jess. So I think from our experience in Papua New Guinea, we are obviously a developing country, so the first thing that would be a challenge is the digital divide. So, and that's when you talk about connectivity, but digital divide also, it's about, the digital literacy and so forth. But that's something that we progressively address through open market telecommunication environment. To address affordability, reliability, and security. The other aspect is also something I've observed, and that's I think a few raised their hands who's in government. It will resonate with you all, but it's like about the citizens' trust, right? So. And I feel for the earlier panel, the commissioner for the e-safety, it's a big challenge to address something that you're going against the wave, and you gotta communicate your issues. You gotta try your best to make holistic policies, and build trust, both from a policy and then when you establish legal framework and when you're actually going out to implement it. So I think trust is probably one of the most, if not biggest, challenges that I face.
Thank you, Stephen. I think you're right, reflecting on how do we bring the society along to the new ways of working, which is the digital transformation, the trust in government, and the balance between that trust and the security settings, which often play into privacy, and a citizen will be concerned about their privacy. And importantly, and we've seen it all with many data breaches in all of our nations, citizens having confidence in government in protecting their data and securing it. So finding that balance is a challenge for a lot of nations in particular. Tupou'tuah, if I may turn to you, what do you see? Are they similar challenges to what Stephen has outlined, or do you have a slightly different lens from Fiji?
Yeah, I think Bula Vinaka, first of all. Good afternoon, colleagues and friends, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think definitely that resonates. I mean, bridging the digital divide is one of the key things. So our top priority continues to be meaningful connectivity, and not just looking at the coverage gap, but also the usage gap. And so, where digital literacy comes in, but also from government, what type of e-services are we rolling out? So ensuring that our people are connected, that they know how to use these online tools in a way that empowers their lives and they can contribute to the national economy, but then also how to ensure that they're navigating these online spaces safely. So I think that's definitely something that we see. The other thing is obviously the surge or the shift in the adoption of digital technologies. And I think this really came on because of COVID. Prior to that, government had a lot of government services, that were out, but then that wasn't being utilized because culturally it was, I would trust that government was paying attention to my concerns. If I showed up to your office and I spoke to a person and I handed a letter, then I sort of knew that was the case. And then because of COVID, that sort of shifted where you now have now understandably the demand is now I want to be able to have those ease of services. But then, we were talking about Fiji, we have 96% coverage in terms of connectivity across our 110 populated islands, but then we still have that digital divide in these rural and remote islands and communities. So how does government ensure that it goes out to all of our people? So I think that continues to be a top priority for us. The other thing I think that we're also looking at as well is sort of, and that's been discussed in the sessions this morning, is these cyber threats that we're seeing that's impacting our people. And so I think that definitely goes not just to digital literacy, but also in terms of one of the key priorities is building a culture of cyber hygiene practices. What does that mean for individuals? What does that mean for communities? What does that mean for businesses? And what does that mean for government? So that definitely is something that we're sort of fine-tuning. I think we need to meet our people where they're at, but also at the same time, more needs to be done by everybody, by all of the stakeholders. All of this is not just government, and that's something that we've constantly been saying. It's a shared responsibility, it's a collective responsibility, but what does that look like? So I think those are some of the key things, and I think just the final point in terms of challenges is obviously the data that we're seeing. In order for us to be able to provide tailored services, we need to understand what are the gaps, where are the gaps, we need to map that out. And so working very closely with stakeholders and partners to be able to identify what the real problems are and then be able to address those is something that is also quite a challenge because we are far from sort of the bigger market, so it is more expensive. And so how do we ensure that we lower those barriers in a way that at the end of the day, our people are able to utilize it in a way that empowers their lives? So I think those are some of the real key challenges that we're looking at, but there's a lot of stakeholders that have, come in to show their commitment. The question now is we need to do more because we're seeing a lot of our people now coming online. And there's a lot of, decreasing or being able to empower them to navigate these online spaces properly is one of the key things. And I just like to highlight, and I'm sure we all know this, which is also why I'm wearing orange. We have the 16 days of activism and the theme globally. And the theme for this year is addressing online harms, again, digital harms, digital violence against women and girls. So I think it's quite timely that we're having these conversations as well. But we need to be able to bring it down to a level where we can see this having impact on the ground, all of these conversations that we're having. So very happy to be here.
Thank you, Tupou. May I just pull in a thread you mentioned? As you increase your digital transformation and ultimately increase connectivity, to your point, that increases the cybersecurity risk because you're raising the attack surface effectively and opening it up. And in Australia, I know we've got a program in our Department of Foreign Affairs where we are working very closely with a range of different nations in the Pacific in particular to help respond to those incidents when they do occur, because as you get more connected, cyber criminals, as we heard on the last panel, state-sponsored actors do take advantage of the vulnerability and in particular the connectivity. So we've obviously worked with a range of nations, including both of yours, in some of those programs. Could I get you to reflect a little bit about on the importance of, as you're coupling digital transformation, how do you then couple that with cybersecurity? And then I will turn to Laurel because you've been very patient waiting, but I think just getting a practical sense on the ground of how you do that balance and what you're seeing shift in the cybersecurity element.
Yeah, thank you. The one thing that I think I'm thankful for is the fact that we've started this quite late in terms of our digital transformation journey. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in that because we get to see what other developed countries are doing and be able to learn. We obviously have very small budgets, and so being able to prioritize whether this goes to schools, whether this goes to health, or whether this goes to communications, that has always been one of the things. But noting how digital has underscored every other sector, it's actually brought that to the forefront. For us, when we started our journey, one of the key things that we understood very quickly is you can't talk about digital transformation without talking about cybersecurity. And how do you embed that in the design, in the planning phase, and then being able to iterate that as we're building those layers. So I think building that ecosystem, that was one of the key things that we were very mindful of, is we need to do this right, but we also need to get a better understanding of what are we trying to address with this digital transformation program. And so I think understanding your why, and then being able to be consistent, because it will take time. That was one of the key things. And so that's why for us, for Fiji, cybersecurity became a priority, because we knew that as the ministry that's responsible for connecting our people, being able to develop these digital tools for them, we also needed to make sure they were secure. And so that's why it didn't make sense for it to be an afterthought. We saw what was happening when we saw technology come in and how it was rushed out, and now we have a cybersecurity industry where now we're trying to play catch up. For us, that wasn't going to work. So I think one of the key things for government was making sure that we embedded that from the very beginning as we were thinking through. So even though we didn't have the laws necessarily in place, it was looking at what was the global practice in terms of a rules-based framework. What did we need to do in terms of policy? So data protection by design, cybersecurity by design, what does that mean? And going with strategic partners who knew what they were doing in that space, but then we knew what needed to be done in Fiji. So I think that collaboration was critically important, and that's what we saw with the Cyber Rapid as well, in terms of being able to work together to carry that out. And that's something that we've seen bring in a lot of the technical expertise is not currently there. We're looking at cyber response, but we're building our national CERTs capabilities. We're building a lot of those institutions that's there. So I think it definitely is a journey. But one of the key things was making sure we thought about that before we even implemented it, which I think was the best approach for us.
Yeah, very, very sensible to build the foundations up. Continuing on the cybersecurity theme, and particularly, Laurel, you look out across all of the region and you have a range of programs to support. What are some of the trends that you've seen, and importantly, what are some of the activities that you're doing in the region to kind of uplift cybersecurity and ultimately put a lot of the nations on that digital transformation path?
Thanks, Jess. My organization, the Asia Foundation, is working on digital skilling and cyber hygiene across about 15 countries in Asia and the Pacific, mostly through a partnership with Google.org. We are seeing huge gaps in security and in trust, and increasingly seeing that the digital divide is not just a connectivity divide, it's a secure connectivity divide. What we're also seeing from the practical work we're doing and related research and analysis that we do to underpin it, that the digital future in the Indo-Pacific is not only shaped by government strategies, by policies, by the big platforms, it's shaped by tens of millions of micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, that are that's what keeps the economies moving in this part of the world. And if they are not secure, then the whole ecosystem is not secure. And Jess, I know you and your government has emphasized that cybersecurity and economic security are one and the same. What we see is that there is a long way to go in even persuading MSMEs that they have a problem and that they have a challenge, and that cybersecurity is not a luxury. I mean, we are seeing through some of our work that even just persuading small business owners to have antivirus software, something that I'm sure everyone in this room takes for granted, is not seen as a necessity until something happens. And this is a vulnerability not only, I mean, importantly for small businesses themselves, which are the lifeblood of the economy in many of these countries. I mean, 99% of businesses in emerging Asia, about 97% in all of Asia, are MSMEs. 70 to 80% of the workforce are people who are working in MSMEs and small business owners. And so when they're vulnerable, that's families and livelihoods that are at risk. But also, these are enterprises that are part of the value chain. Mm-hmm. And if they are the weak link in the value chain in terms of cybersecurity, that can affect the whole supply chain upstream. And so this is about safety for large swaths of the economy, not only in terms of number of businesses, but even in the high value businesses as well. We're also saying that even some of the really small businesses are beginning to adopt AI tools. But that's just amplifying the threat and the risk because of many of the things that you've been discussing here today. But I think it really, I don't think I can overstate the extent to which just the basics that seem simple but aren't simple really need to be attended to. And this is a development challenge, not a technological challenge, because we're not necessarily talking about very sophisticated technology that needs to be disseminated and imparted, but it needs to be disseminated in a way that is very community-based, that is in local languages, that is imparted through trusted partners. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're establishing cyber clinics at universities all over the region. And the reason for that is because then you have these young people who are going out into their communities in order to do the training of MSMEs, and they're able to work in a way that is suited for the particular context, and we're developing a talent pipeline in that way too. There's a big, it's not the high-end elite talent that is the real gap. It's a much broader based skills gap than that.
Tupou, you were nodding and smiling when Laurel was talking. Are you living and feeling this? And I don't know, Stephen, whether you've got some solutions that you've already put in, because you mentioned how you engage your populace and how you engage the citizens. Do either of you want to share whether you're seeing similar reflections to Laurel?
Yeah, I think that's something that, as government, one of the things that we need to be mindful of, because of the way in which the message is communicated and how it is communicated in terms of different segments of our population. So I think that's something that even we've been looking at, various sort of, whether it's champions, advocates. We have our Online Safety Commission that was established in 2018 that works very closely with the ministry, but also with education and other stakeholders. So we're seeing this in terms of when was it? Last month we had launched a toll-free number. Part of us trying to get that to be trendy was we got a song.
Everyone loves a song.
And we got a lot of the artists that are their songs are very popular for them to do the song or to sing it. And so now we're even looking at maybe doing the dance challenge, just so that we can so that people can remember the number. So I think there are all of these different sort of initiatives that we need to, because it can't just be the one message out from government, and also different people listen to different stakeholders. They may not come and listen to me, but they may listen to Online Safety, or they may listen to another agency. So I think the key thing for us is also streamlining that coordination. We have one message. How does that one message go down to the different audience? But then how do you do the message in a way that you're able to communicate where they accept it? And so I think that's something that we're understanding, that we need to sort of pivot and make sure that we do that. Yeah.
I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of it's not a tech problem. We need to get mindset change. Yeah. Stephen, do you have a song or a dance that you use that lands in PNG? Can we see your song and your dance? Come on, it's getting close to the end of the day.
Unfortunately, no.
No, that's fair, Stephen. You're facing a similar challenge though. I guess my question to you is, we've spoken a little bit about how government has a responsibility, and all of you have mentioned a range of programs where government is reaching out to a whole range of citizens, and also strategies that you've put in place, government, in terms of regulations and engagement. But we have a lot of industry in the room here today. Do you have messages for industry in terms of small Pacific nations? What would your key message to industry be in terms of helping you through some of these challenges?
I over the years, I've been in this role for 5 years, and I see a lot of industry and players come in, and they pitch, they do their thing, and I think that you have to see it from a different context when you come to a country like Papua New Guinea. It's one is there's funding constraints, and there's a lot of other dynamics, politically, economically, socially, culturally, that you have to take into context. Some will come and say that here's the scope, here's the cost. Take it or leave it. What I see, the companies that come in that are successful, they take this step of empathy, and they become more of development partners, and they grow with the economy. So it depends how you see Papua New Guinea. Are you seeing it as a cup that's empty, or a cup that's empty but can be filled up? And it just depends on that. And so I tell everyone that come in, and we partner with those that I say, you gotta get skin in the game, and you gotta get tough skin too, but the returns will be high because the potential, it's an empty cup that can be full. So you should be able to, if you see you may look at it and say, okay, here's the GDP per capita of the country, but that person should be seeing what it can be. Yeah. So the industry should be seeing what it can be. Come in, get your skin in the game, and grow with it. So that's what I would say to any industry player, or for that matter, investors. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. I can see some industry colleagues writing this down. I will share with the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia, we partner very closely with industry, some of the industry in the room here, when we provide some of our modernisation and our incident response work out into the Pacific. And it works when we send the same industry person every time, because they've got a relationship and trust. And it works when we embed either with government and industry in with your departments, sitting side by side for weeks and months. And that speaks to the trust. But I think to your point, Stephen, growing up with each of the individuals within the departments, that's where we've seen relationships, trust form, and true modernisation and change occurs as a result of that partnership in that way. So that model has worked because of the humans who understand empathy, understand how to tailor and tweak, but are also the same face that you see every time. So there is a relationship there. Laurel, do you want to share a little bit about how you've kind of harnessed industry and how you work with them, and maybe what your call to industry is, particularly having a US background and an understanding of how to tap into the big US system as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you really pointed to something important, Jess, when you mentioned how your government is working with industry. I mean, it's not just industry, it's not just government. We're talking about problems of access and affordability, and there are things that industry can do, and they're businesses, yes. Right? So, I mean, there is a bottom line, and that's the reality, and so that's why why you have to have partnerships. And as I mentioned, the particular work that I mentioned, we do in partnership with Google.org, which has seen, there's a social benefit aspect to what they're doing, but obviously they want a digital economy to be able to thrive and thrive safely, and that's in their corporate interest as well. There are other companies that we work with too on some of our skilling projects. But ensuring access, there's always going to be an important government role there, and ensuring affordability. And so there are, and the regulatory environment, of course. And so if we are going to have more standardization of at least minimum standards of safety for businesses, there are ways that government can use procurement policies and others. It's not just about programs to train people, but it can use their own government policies to ensure that that there is dissemination of at least some minimum standards. And then, of course, there are roles for organizations like ours that work in partnership with governments in the region, with civil society at the community level, and can translate these ideas into an adoptable and understandable form for communities. So it's, it takes an ecosystem of actors to solve these problems. And I think that's really the key message there.
Thank you. I'm going to throw to the audience very shortly, but I have one more question for Tupou on this. Do you have a message to industry as well? And I share that Tupou and I have attended many events with big tech, including Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And often when you ask for changes to be made to certain aspects of the tech, the response is, oh, you're such a small market share, it doesn't make sense from a business model perspective. So do you have a message that you would share with industry, recognizing that obviously you are speaking for Fiji, but cognizant of the Pacific as well and your leadership role there?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I mean, my one take would be just go ahead and do it. Partner with us. I think the reality is when we're looking globally, and I think the recent stats are 2.2 billion people are still offline. Majority of them are in SIDS, in least developing countries, are in landlocked countries. So that's where the need is. I think there's a lot of goodwill that's there. We need to just figure out what does that mean in terms of what would make sense, right? For and I think that there's a lot of ways to partner. One of the key things that Stephen was mentioning, which we agree with as well, is we view it as a partnership. It is not transactional, and I don't think it can ever be transactional for us, in the sense that when we're bringing partners in, we're understanding that the ecosystem that we're building, obviously, the impact of that, and making sure that that is secure, making sure that that is able to meet evolving needs of our people is critically important. So having partners that have that same mindset makes that a lot more easier, because we come in the room and then we figure out what is the out-of-box solution that can address that. Like, yes, there'll always be a cost factor, but at the end of the day, if we're all saying that this is an important area that we need to invest in, that we need to make sure that we address this gap, it's, how does that happen? Government cannot sort of come up with that alone. We need everyone. And I think one of the key things that we found out very early is we have obviously the cost in terms of these cybersecurity devices and tools and software, and the cost that it has for governments, and as we were mentioning in terms of the money or the funds that we have, there is hospitals, for Fiji, and I've always said this, we can't talk about cybersecurity, we can't talk about digital transformation without talking about the impacts of climate change and what does it mean to build climate resilient ICT infrastructure. And just a quick example for Fiji, in 2016, we had the biggest cyclone that we had, which was Cyclone Winston, that took out 40% of our GDP. And so even trying to address that at the time, while trying to build back, obviously climate resilient infrastructure is important. Studies show that for every $1 spent on preparedness actually saves up to $7 to $10 US in terms of mitigation and adaptation. So there's a lot of business sense to that. It's figuring out what does that actually look like and what does that mean. It needs all of us in the room. Government is not an expert when you're looking at all of this, you know, in terms of industry and the technical expertise. We need to sit down and work together to figure that out. And how do we lower those barriers and those costs to ensure that our people that are being connected are able to be, you know, to harness the opportunities of digital technologies, I think is the end goal. And I'm sure everyone here has that same goal. The next question is, how do we get there? And so, yeah, I think for us is, you know, partner with us, welcome, and from the sort of as a region point of view, you know, the ICT ministers had met in 2023 in Papua New Guinea, where they had adopted the Lakatoi Declaration, which is the regional declaration on digital transformation and cybersecurity. We were able to then last year in well, no, it was this year. It was this year. In August, we were able to get the action plan endorsed, and the Pacific leaders in Solomon Islands this year were able to endorse that as well. Last week at the ITU WTDC, which is the telecommunications, the development conference, was able to, we got the whole ITU membership, which is made up of 194 member countries, also including the various stakeholders, technical industry, academia, were able to agree to a new resolution on the Lakatoi Declaration, which obviously will include the funding mechanisms for that needs to be discussed. But there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I think we need to focus on, as was mentioned, look at the long term, what are we trying to address? And then the details, we can sort that out. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to be able to address this global need that we see. And yeah, my message would be, let's go.
I think, you mentioned climate, and I was surprised it took us 20 minutes to get to climate, but it is a critical component that needs to be considered, needs to be part of the discussion with digital transformation. You've also mentioned multilaterals. And multilats are not dead. I've seen the global mechanisms now in play. We make sure that there is a Pacific voice in those forums. I know the Australian government helps to ensure that we send over a lot of the Pacific nations to make sure they get a seat at that table, because the Pacific voice is needed in that room, and where we're making and setting some of those standards and in particular some of the norms. If we don't have a Pacific voice, then people will be left behind, and it's so critical. So thank you personally for championing that, and I know Stephen also is championing a lot in that space as well from the Pacific leadership perspective. I did promise I would go to the audience now, so I'm going to open the floor up to the audience. It's not every day you get practitioners like this in the room, so if there are any questions that you would like, I see a hand just over there. I'm sorry, I can't see faces. And we'll just get a roaming mic through to you. And if it's okay for you to just announce your name and where you're from, that'll help us with our framing. Thank you.
Colin Clark, Breaking Defense. I hear a lot of talk about the very necessary layers of protection once you are connected to the internet, but we haven't really talked about the fundamental threat, which is to your cables that provide you with service. There isn't much capability in the region. Australia doesn't have it, the Pacific Islands don't have it. You can sort of keep things rolling, but if there's an organized attack, can you cope, and what are you doing to deal with this fundamental threat?
So I might just start. You're exactly right. There's been a lot of effort put into ensuring new subsea cables have been laid to enable that connectivity, which is the first foundational element, which has brought a lot of the Pacific, particularly online, through a range of diverse options with your cable settings and still with very trusted cable providers. But you're right, your question really goes to, once you've laid the cable and you're using the cable, how are we repairing it and ensuring it and enabling to ensure effectively that it is secure through peaceful times, but also if there is a more nefarious approach to those cables. I don't know, Tupou'tuah or Stephen or Laurel, do you want to take an answer? I'm happy to give an Australian government perspective, but it would be useful to understand it from the regional perspective as well.
Okay, maybe I'll have a go with that. So for Papua New Guinea, we've got essentially, effectively two cables. running, and of course one was, thanks to the Australian government, the Coral Sea cable that was gifted, and then of course we have a domestic around the mainland, and we've got over 600 islands as well. But the mainland plus the other main lands has it's a total of 15 landing sites. I'll take my cue from discussions that we had last week with Google, and that was they came in and we were discussing how we could widen up not only efficiency but avoiding a single point of failure, because I think that's from the advice that I got from Google was that if we're going to invest more data centers and have more reliability and more redundancy with storage, you got to have the resilience with the cables, and the cables have to be operating all independently. And so open market competition is important at that wholesale level. And so I think that for us in Papua New Guinea, that's got to translate into our legislative efforts in the telecommunication space. So to be specific, we probably need to get to around 6 cables, and this is to service 10.1 million people. And those cables need to be operating independently within a competition framework. And that, I think competition is essential to mitigate risks. And there's a lot of other spaces to touch, but I think I'll just stop there, that I think competition is key to mitigating a lot of risks.
Thanks, Stephen.
I would just make the perhaps obvious observation that you can mitigate the risks, but countries with very high-end military and and intelligence capabilities have been, this risk has been exposed for them as well. So, there are limitations to what you can do.
Capacity, correct.
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that we're looking at very closely. I mean, for Fiji, we also had the Google cables landed earlier this year. I think the main thing for us is leveraging on the expertise of the partners that we bring on board. Yes, more needs to be done in terms of better understanding, the different frameworks that need to be in place. I think one of the, which is why we're part of these global discussions and forums in terms of what's the role of government, what's the role of the private sector, what's the role of academia, and then making sure that there is that collaboration that's there. There's, discussions happening right now in terms of designating subsea cables as critical information infrastructure and what goes into a designation. These are things that we're looking at very closely, but it is a fact that the technical expertise that is needed is something that requires us to all work closer together. So I think closer multi-stakeholder collaboration is critically important to making sure that we address these gaps that we're seeing. And as we're rolling out new subsea cables, what are some of the policies that need to be put in place? What are some of the frameworks that need to be put in place? And the talent that we need to have to be able to address not just the current threats that we're seeing, but what's evolving and what's emerging as well.
I'm cognizant there's 4 questions in 2.5 minutes, so I'll start over here.
Stephen Halpin from Arch Cyber. A quick one I wanted to touch on was around the cyber literacy point that you made. Something that we've experienced here in Australia when we're talking to boards is that cyber literacy wasn't necessarily there. It was about uplifting them to understand that cyber wasn't a one and done investment. Given your digital transformation journey, how are your governments viewing that cyber investment?
We'll just have one answer, if that's okay for timing-wise. Who would like to go? Go, Stephen.
Well, for Papua New Guinea, I think to raise the standards, I'll give you the government answer. And that's we have to legislate. And I think I spoke to you and a few others out there that we're going to have to legislate the accreditation framework for professionals, even for SOC and in the industry as well. And we've got a draft cybersecurity legislation. That's just the best way to raise the standards. But it also grows, it drives the demand, right? So that's my answer.
I have one line.
Oh, please, Tupou'tuah.
Just the one line that we're talking with boards about. But basically, the message to the boards is that it is not a technical issue, but a business issue. And then there's a lot of examples, obviously. So trying to communicate that is one way to be able to get them to, this is how you're resilient. You need to do these things. And so I think that's the messaging that we're trying to, yeah.
Yeah, they're accountable in the end, not the CISO. That's another question.
I think there's one over there.
Yeah.
Paul
Hiya.
Toomey. Stephen, a question for you. You've led digital DPI
Hi, Paul.
deployment in Australia, in New Guinea. In August or September, the ministers talked about making it broader so that there'd be more talking of DPI across the Pacific as a whole. What do you see as important to Australia about that issue? When you think about digital public infrastructure in the Pacific, how important is it going to be to Australian Home Affairs departments and New Zealand Home Affairs departments in the long run? Especially around migration and people movements.
So your question is on digital public infrastructure.
That's right.
Okay. Nice to see you again, Paul. I think digital public infrastructure, you have your foundational is identity, and then you have interoperability, and then payment infrastructure, and there's other sector-based public infrastructure. For Papua New Guinea, I think that's a strategy to scale up because it's modular, it's interoperable, and it's an opportunity to reuse that infrastructure. And I think you just think about a road that you're building, and everyone rides on it, health sector, education sector, just for interoperability or for payment or digital ID. So that's how we're doing it with digital ID right now. I would say that I think that we're talking about undersea cables, and that's a critical infrastructure. But we're not talking enough about digital public infrastructure that's critical, because you may own or you may have sovereign oversight on an undersea cable, but what about sovereign oversight on a digital public infrastructure? So this is just something I'm just throwing out, and it's maybe something that, as development partners, I'll just say that in general that we.
You're looking at Australia there, Stephen? I saw the wink as you looked over at me.
Yeah, I think that there's an interest for us all to pay attention to that.
We have a responsibility and obligation in that space, you're correct. Thank you. And I think we're up to our last question, if I may.
Thanks, hiya. Miriam Howe, BAE Systems. I love the idea of a dance, a cybersecurity dance. I've got a funny story for you later, actually. But a lot of this is about raising awareness, but some of it is also about attracting talent into cybersecurity, both from education and from mature. Just what's the best thing you've seen? What's the best technique that you've used to try and attract people into cybersecurity profession?
Tupou'tuah?
Alrighty. This is something that we're still sort of looking at as well, but I think trying to get to them as young as we can. One of the challenges that we see more from a cultural point was in terms of choosing it as a career path, if you're talking about cybersecurity or if you're talking about digital, and more, what we're seeing now, because it is cutting across all of these other sectors, you don't necessarily need to be doing coding to be in this space. And so it's opened up a lot of that, but then also making sure that there's a lot more women. If you're looking at, the representation of women in this workforce, globally statistics are that we need to do more. A lot is being done, but we need to do more. And so I think for us is trying to see how we can do it as young, and working with the Ministry of Education to relook at curriculum. That's not an easy thing to do, but from the ministry point of view, we do Girls in ICT programs. We do, when we do our connectivity programs in schools, which is the telecenter program, so we go into communities because schools and health centers are built in rural communities, and then the communities usually are surrounded by it. So we outfit the schools with technology, but then at the same time, in the weekends and in the evenings, that opens up as a computer lab, but it also has a volunteer that's there to do digital literacy classes. And now we're trying to include cybersecurity. So we see that the interest is increasing, but then how do we ensure that we stay with these young people on that journey where they continue to then come and join the workforce, because that's one of the key challenges. So we're definitely trying a lot of different things, working with partners to be able to do that. So also call to action for our private sector, please work with us on this, because I think that there's definitely, it's an area that needs to be looked at. The workforce gap issue is a serious issue. How do we address that? We need our people to be trained, but we need them to be interested in this space as well. So how do we communicate that is one of the things that we're trying out a lot of different things, and I'd love to hear the dance story later as well.
Can I say
Laurel,
two
please.
quick points on that? A couple of things that we've seen that have worked are job integrated training. I mean, if you're exposing young people just in general, you might get the interest of some, but if they see it as specifically linked to a job opportunity, that works really well. And a second thing we've seen is vendor certifications. So young people, they when they get like an actual certification, I'm certified in Microsoft technology or whatever it is, I'm not planning to pay favorites with Microsoft, that's really helpful. That helps them in the workforce. It's just very, very practical steps like that, starting early, but really linked to employment opportunity.
In the journey on.
Yeah.
We are well and truly over time, and the clock is flashing red at us. So I'm going to extend a huge thank you to the panel. This has opened up for all of us opportunities and challenges with digital transformation, but particularly through that Indo-Pacific lens, which is such a critical lens for us to be cognizant of, particularly here in Australia. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.